Hey everyone, if you like this video, do that thing with the thumbs up like rating at the bottom. All the cool kids say that, so I thought I'd say that. If you didn't like that, if you didn't like this, shoot me a comment, say this is stupid. But anyway, I hope you enjoy the video. Alright, hello, I've had a few people ask me, well not ask me, but there's a few people that I've talked about, and I've been doing kind of team building advice, I guess, with a few people, and every time I kind of feel like I try to explain the same thing, um, and it's something that it's pretty basic, but a lot of people kind of overlook when they make a team. So I kind of want to go over really quick. I guess at least how I build a team. I'm using some extremes right here. I'm using the Chancy Skarmory core, which I'll go over in a few seconds, obviously, so that you know what I'm talking about. But this is pretty much like the most basic defensive core you can get in OU, honestly. It's very simple, very efficient, and everyone hates it when they see it, and like 30% of people just forfeit because it's really cheap because it works. But I'll go over it. So basically, what a defensive core is say you have Dragonite, right? And let's say they have, I don't know, let's say, I know Greninja's banned, but I can't think, it's the best thing I can think of right now. Let's say they've got a Greninja with Ice Beam, right? And let's say Stealth Rocks are up, so your Dragonite is not at 100% health. Either that or you're running Inner Focus. But let's say you're not at 100% health, so Multi-Scale is not intact. Actually, Weavile is probably a better example. So they've got Weavile, they're going to outspeed you, and they're going to kill you with Ice Shard. And you know they're going to kill you, and the thing is, and you don't have extreme speed. Let's say that, okay? A lot of ifs here, but let's say you don't have extreme speed. And let's say Dragonite has potential to pretty much sweep your opponent's entire team. So you look at your team, you say, oh, I need Dragonite live. Basically, you need something to switch into Weavile, right? Because you can't have Dragonite. You might have things on your team that are bulky, but they're not going to be able to take 2 hits from Weavile. Like, let's say you want to switch in, I don't know, let's say you want to switch in anything that can that can take any hit from Weavile and kill it. Well, you switch in, take an Ice Punch, and then what? You take a second Ice Punch and you lose that Pokemon, right? So basically, what you can do is you can just straight up bring in Skarmory in, which is going to be your physically defensive wall. And as a physically defensive wall, obviously you're going to have very high defensive stat. You kind of want to have a decent special defense stat, but that's really not that important. Skarmory can take pretty much any hit from Weavile. If they start Swords Dancing, you can just whirlwind it out. Basically, Skarmory can hard counter Weavile. Now, the thing about walls is they aren't very offensive. Skarmory's not going to be doing very much, but it is going to be able to deal with Weavile quite nicely. Now, if you didn't have something that was pretty much pure bulk on your team, this Weavile could wreak havoc on your team. They could just kill anything that you have to switch into. Then when you get your switch after you let something die, they can switch out, bring something of theirs in, and then pretty much every time Weavile comes in, you can get a free kill. They can get a free kill, if that makes sense. It's basically just kind of as a last resort, you know? If the Pokemon that you currently have in cannot take a hit and is slower or cannot do really anything back, you need something to fall back on. And against really offensive things, kind of need a defensive core to support your team. Now, looking at this, you have Skarmory, right? Skarmory is very physically defensive. It is not exceptionally specially defensive if you're running this spread. So basically, any special attacker is going to do a good number against your Skarmory here. And other than that, fire types, electric types, they're all going to do a lot. They're all going to really, really shut down Skarmory, and you don't want that. So they bring in I don't know, electric type, a special attacking electric type. And you're like, well, shoot, I don't have, I can't keep Skarmory in. So you need to have a special wall, obviously, something that can switch into any special hit and stay in against any special hit. So it has to be able to take, it has to be able to live pretty much any special attack that would threaten your physical wall at above half health, so you can heal off the damage. Um, the only reason it's running max defense is because Chansey has really bad defense. Most special walls run max HP, max defense, but honestly, just because Chansey has such bad defense, you are going to be wanting to run max HP, max defense. But any other special wall is this is like the exception for the special wall. So Chansey can take pretty much any special attack that threatens Skarmory, and you have a nice core right here. And it's pretty easy. If they have a special attacker, click Chansey. If they have a physical attacker, click Skarmory, and it works out pretty nicely. They have a lot of moves to support each other. I'll go over what support moves your core is going to kind of need in a little bit, but there is one more thing, and that's a 2 Pokemon core isn't always going to be the best. Sometimes your opponent is going to have really strong special attackers that your special wall cannot deal with. For instance, if your opponent has a Keldeo, let's say Choice Specs Keldeo, Chansey isn't going to do very well against a Choice Specs Keldeo if it starts slamming Secret Swords. No, where is it? Yeah, there it is. They start spamming. Oh no, I was right the first time, wasn't I? It doesn't really matter. If they start spamming stab, specs, really powerful special attacks that is super effective against your wall, that's going to be an issue. On the other hand, if your opponent has something like Talonflame, which is a really strong physical attacker, Skarmory isn't going to be able to deal with that very well, right? So you kind of need something to glue them all together, all the weaknesses that they share together. When I used to run the cheap as hell Chansey Skarm, it's called the Skarm Bliss core, because people used to run Blissey. But when I used to run the dreaded Skarm Bliss core, I would run Dragonite as a good intermediate in between. Actually, I'd run Scizor over Skarmory back in the day, but I'm just using most basic. But I'd use Dragonite because it's a really good intermediate. Dragonite, Keldeo gets Icy Wind, that's fine, but Dragonite can take special fighting type hits from Keldeo, and it can take fire type hits from Talonflame. And with weakness policy, if it goes for the fighting type move, you should be able to get not with weakness policy, with the fighting type move from Keldeo and multi-scale. If you have taken no damage, you should be able to get most of it back with leftovers and be back at your multi-scale. So you can take a Icy Wind if they have it, and hit them back with anything. But if Keldeo's not Specs, Chansey, well, I guess if it's Calm Mind. Okay, going back, if it's Specs, they're going to have to play around your Dragonite, which means, you have a pretty good defensive core. If it's sub Calm Mind, it won't have a Ice type attack, and you will be able to deal with it with Dragonite either way, because you can take Water types. Talonflame dies to Dragon Claw and Extreme Speed, which is what I use. I use a semi-defensive thing. So your last Pokemon is kind of a support thing to glue your other 2 Pokemon's weaknesses together. So basically, anything that you can't cover, anything that you can't do with these 2 Pokemon, you will need to have your 3rd Pokemon here to accomplish those roles. So I used to run mine with Roost and Extreme Speed or Priority, and just other moves that would get rid of what threaten my core. So it's basically just a support Pokemon, and it's really only there to support your defensive core. So that's basically what your defensive core is just Pokemon that can switch in on any type of attack, really, because you want to build a team that can kind of deal with almost anything. And this is kind of looking like a stall team, but hyper offense team, well, not hyper offense teams, bulky offense teams or balanced teams also try to follow this formula, but they don't use, stupid bullshit like Chansey and Skarmory. They use more offensive things, but they still need something specially defensive, something physically defensive, and a good intermediate as a way to lock up their team. As a final thing, I'm going to kind of go over what you want to have, what you want your walls to accomplish. If you just bring in your walls and they don't do anything, that's not really that useful, honestly, because they can just, let's say your only move on Skarmory is Aerial Ace, okay? Obviously it's not going to be, but let's say your only move on Skarmory is Aerial Ace. Then they can just stay in, they can Swords Dance, they can keep hitting you for chip damage until you die. There's a number of things they can do, and if you only have Aerial Ace, there's nothing you're going to do back. Now, obviously, that's never going to happen, but you're going to want, first of all, pretty much any defensive, especially defensive wall in the game, you're going to want to have instant recovery on. Now, the exception for this is if you have a Wish Passer, you can kind of get away with your other wall not having recovery. A good example of this, is I've seen in NU people use, in NU I like to run Fortress, and I like to run like Vaporeon, or I usually run Umbreon just because it's kind of better. It doesn't have the best defensive synergy between the two, but it's good. It works. So let's say Fortress and Umbreon. They support each other nicely. Fortress does not have recovery, but Vaporeon, in theory, can just pass wishes into it all day, every day, which is kind of nice. So that's the only real exception, but I don't really like doing that because it's very situational, and if your physical wall goes down, you pretty much lose to physical attackers. If they have any physical attackers left, physical wall goes down, pretty much lose if you can't deal with their other Pokemon. Sometimes your glue support Pokemon can kind of deal with them, but again, really iffy. Between your defensive core, you're usually going to want to have some way to get rid of hazards. This is just kind of a formula for most teams. You're going to want to have a way to get rid of hazards. If you are a defensive team, pretty much any team that is not a hyper offense team is going to want to have a way to get rid of hazards because they hurt teams a lot. Especially this example right here, your Dragonite is, it's weak to rocks, so you're going to want to have something for it. You often want to have a phasing move between your core. Don't have to. I like to run Whirlwind sometimes with Skarmory, but doesn't really have to. Also going to want to have probably Stealth Rocks. That's also a maybe. You don't really have to, but it's very nice for your defensive core to do because let's say you have let's say you have Aerial Ace. Your base attack is 80, which is good, but it's completely uninvested. So if you start going for your attacking moves and they switch into, anything that doesn't care about your base 80 flying attack, then the momentum you gained by switching into Skarmory, is pretty much lost because they switched in pretty much for free. On the other hand, if they had to switch out because Skarmory walls you, so walls whatever they have, and you set up Stealth Rocks, you didn't lose any momentum because you have just put yourself forward in the game in the sense that they don't really have any more free switches. They switched into a Defogger. That's a bit different because they're in before rocks and they can defog, but kind of forces them to defog because they have to defog and you are able to switch into whatever you want. Last slot, you're going to want to have just an attacking move. Usually, you don't have to. Sometimes you can run quite comfortably without any attacking moves. The thing with that is you get shut down by Taunt, and that Taunt is a pretty big thing against defensive cores. So you have one attacking move that's going to be very nice to help you out against Taunt. And then also on your team, I'm just going, all these moves doesn't have to be specifically on your defensive wall, especially specifically on your physical wall. basically it would be nice to have between your defensive core. You kind of want to have as many of these things checked off as you can. Moving on from there, soft boiled, instant recovery. I went over that. You're going to want to have some way to get rid of status if you are, depending on how defensive or how offensive your team is, you'll want to have some way to get rid of status. A lot of walls are just so weak that you're going to want to have a way to inflict status. Toxic is the best way to do that. Shuts down other defensive walls. Very good. And then, of course, so you're not taunt bait. Not all these moves are all completely interchangeable. You can run. You just want to, and they're not all mandatory. You just want to have as many of them as you can. So it's very nice to have something with status. Very nice to have something with a way to remove status. Very nice to have some way to remove hazards, some way to set up hazards, and instant recovery, obviously, on all your walls. You don't need to run Roost on Dragonite if you don't want. As a matter of fact, you can just make this a completely offensive set, but it'll still be able to support your core. I just like to run a semi-defensive Dragonite set because if you're using Chansey and Skarmory, you're pretty much using a defensive team, and it's kind of nice to have something that can just pretty much guarantee to keep them alive. So that's pretty much everything to do with your defensive core, and then moving on to why your defensive core is so important is just to support the rest of your team. So if you have, let's say, what do we need? This is just going to be this is not going to be a really good example. I'm just picking I'm just picking to do with types and type synergy. So let's say you have a Heatran, and let's say your offensive Heatran, because you don't want to have too many defensive things. Or let's say maybe this is a stall team, so whatever. But let's say we have a Heatran, and Heatran's not that slow. So let's say they have an Excadrill, and you have your Heatran out, and they have their Excadrill out, and you're not Air Balloon. You're going to be like, well, shoot, that sucks. I wish I had something to switch into Earthquake, because you're not going to stay in on a move that's that super effective against you. Then you realize you have Skarmory, so you switch into Skarmory, and Excadrill cannot touch Skarmory. And that's just basically it. Anything that threatens your offensive core, because you're going to have 3 offensive Pokemon that have pretty nice offensive synergy, but they can't beat everything. So you basically need things to support your offensive core. When you really get down to it, it's just Pokemon to support your offensive core. That's basically all it is. I don't know. I don't know how exactly helpful this was. It might not have been very helpful. It might have been boring. If you think it was good, let me know in the comments. If you think it was bad and boring, also let me know in the comments, and I guess I'll take it down. Because if it's not useful, I'll take it down. But if you want to see more of how I build a team, or more about team building advice, maybe to do with offensive synergy, maybe to kind of go more into what a team requires, kind of like the basic formula of a team. Want me to go more over type synergy? Let me know, and I'll go over that stuff. Because honestly, I don't know how helpful this video was. I was just ranting. I haven't really planned anything out. But yeah, that's about it. I'm out.